You're telling me that if some ghost wouldn't stop on your face, that you wouldn't be horrified? They should have blown into the straw and like inflated the penis like a balloon animal and then like. Honestly, though, the inside of her vagina seems lovely. Like there's a log cabin and everything. The time has come. It is officially October, which means that it is spooky season. I thought it would be fun for us to start off this spooky season with some hauntings, slightly unusual types of hauntings. So I have 4 stories to share with you today that are all hauntings in unexpected places. First up. I have been wanting to read this story for probably over a year now, and that is the Amityville Bukkake. Can I say that? This story is by Edward Lee, Judith Sonnet, and R.J. Benetti. The cover, the stains on the cover, the title, this is so ridiculous. I have to read this. So the plot of this story. You have this adult film crew, which comprises of the boss, Joey, and then you have this other dude. Okay, he goes by Shooter, but his real name is Gilbert. You know, Shooter is the male adult film performer, and he goes by Shooter for a reason, you know, but I really wish he would go by Gilbert. But, you know, it's not up to me. And then we have 2 women performers. We have Lois, who her main thing that we know about her is that she's Australian. And we have Shauna. The main thing we know about her is that she has exceptionally low self-esteem. And she's dating Shooter. And Shooter sucks. We do not like Shooter. He's not good to Shauna. He is abusive. He's not just like, oh, not great. Like, he's straight up abusive to her. That's our little quad group. They are going to the iconic Amityville house. They are renting it out. And so they're going there to film a spicy film in this haunted house for a specific client. He just likes to send them to different places where famous murders have taken place. And this is just the next up on the list. It actually is haunted. And so that disrupts their filmmaking a tad. These ghosts they're there, but they just happen to also be horny. You know, like they're horny ghosts aside from these specific people being there for this purpose, you know, like that's just how the ghosts are, I guess. So it's just kind of a happy ending. It's a happy coincidence. These ghosts and this film crew with this combined interest have come together. Things I liked about this story. Now, I have to admit, I have not read R.J. Benetti before. I cannot speak to any references to his previous work, but I did notice that they did bring up the location from a book by Judith Sonnet that has kind of a similar plot called Magic. I believe that was the first book I ever read from her. That's where an adult film crew goes to a haunted brothel. So of course it's a fairly similar premise. So of course they do address that, and they act as if that brothel also exists in this universe. They also reference a naked seance, which is something that happened in an Edward Lee book. I don't remember. It was part of the Pig series, but I don't remember which book it was. But to be honest with you, it would not surprise me if Edward Lee has more than one book with a naked seance in it. There were parts of this book where I really did feel like I could see the specific influence from Edward Lee or Judith Sonnet. Unfortunately, I have not read R.J. Benetti, but if I read him in the future, I might be able to look back on this and see it in hindsight. As you would expect, this does get quite depraved and quite vile, but I was kind of surprised. I kind of thought that based just the title, it made me laugh so hard the first time I ever saw it. And I really kind of expected this to have a bit of a sillier tone to it than it actually did. There are moments levels of humor in it. A lot of the humor had to do with Lois being Australian and her accent or her saying certain phrases at certain times. That's very silly. Where I actually kind of felt like there was an attempt at humor that was just, in my opinion, a little bit misplaced. As previously mentioned, we have the male performer Shooter, aka Gilbert, and Shauna, who are a couple. He is physically abusive to her. Not only does that in and of itself get kind of repetitive and redundant because it's just described as him smacking her repeatedly, which I guess is the point. He feels no guilt about it and he just does it willy-nilly. But reading it, it did start to feel a little repetitive. So there's a quote after there was a physical altercation in which Shauna says, if he keeps, or she thinks, if he keeps hitting me like that, I'll get Dane Bramage, she thought, reeling away. It's not meant to be that deep or anything, but I guess it just sort of felt like the humor was a little bit misplaced. Because you have this insane premise and you have so many opportunities to do silly, ridiculous things. I would have preferred that it was more in line with the already kind of silly, ridiculous elements of the story, not the more realistic part, I guess. When you have ghosts and stuff and you're breaking that barrier of things needing to be realistic within our world, it's like, okay, well, you can do whatever you want. The world is your oyster. I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I would have if it had actually just been a little bit sillier. The title of it, the premise of it, I just think it would have lent itself really well. But if you remove that expectation from it and you just look at it for what it actually is, there's gore and smut and there's bodily fluids. All the horror elements are there and they're solid. So if you just remove any expectation of it being particularly silly, despite the moments of humor, it just really doesn't have a silly tone overall. Okay, next up we have Herbert Pickman's Demonic Penis by Roman Neznayu. I stumbled upon this on godless.com. So I had never heard of this author before. There is an unfortunate incident in this involving some peanut butter and a dog named Ralph. So our warning, there's a dog. I'm gonna be real with you. If our main character had a name, I did not think it was important enough to write down. So either it's not in there or I just didn't care. That's his name. Herbert. Our guy here is like, hey, are you familiar with the Necronomicon? If you're familiar with H.P. Lovecraft and the Necronomicon, that it is a book that is powerful and it can be used to bring people back from the dead and other things. I'm not sure, but at least that. But our guy here is like, hey, if it can bring a person back from the dead, surely it can bring my incapacitated penis back to life. So he decides to use the Necronomicon to try to help aid in his flaccid penis. And he does that and it works. But does it? It works. I don't want to say it works too well. It works, but there's some side effects. It's getting larger, but not like ooh, like oh no. It's getting like too big, and also it has eyes. And I'm pretty sure I wrote down somewhere that it hisses. It also starts to become covered in dragon-like scales. So there's a lot going on. But our guy Herbert here, he's like, well, this is a lot, but he really does seem to find silver linings, and he tries to put it to good use. And that's the basic premise. So what I liked about this story, everything that I just said. It's a very, very funny premise. And I enjoyed the core concept of this story I enjoyed a lot. I thought it was very funny. Parts that were questionable, let's say. Oftentimes when you're reading smaller writers, self-published authors, things of that nature, a lot of times they don't have an editor, and so you will notice the mistakes from time to time. Now, if I notice like one spelling mistake or something, I'm not so inclined to say anything about it because I get it. But if something is like a plot issue or is just otherwise a pretty egregious mistake, I'll just kind of mention it because I know it does. That stuff bothers some people more than others. There was one quote on here that is pretty noticeably off. So this is the only thing I have read from him. And so because of that, I do not want to make any sweeping generalizations about this author as a person. I don't think that that's fair to do based off of reading one story. That being said, the way that something comes across in this story, we're getting into, we talked a few videos back about nuance in writing, and I specifically mentioned how people have a hard time distinguishing between an author writing a racist character versus an author sharing racist rhetoric that is their own voice coming through. In this story, there is a Black character. The fact that he is Black is not relevant to anything that's happening in the story, other than the fact that Herbert and this other character are apparently racist. Is the fact that Herbert and this other character are racist relevant to the story in any way? No, it's not even really character building because this is a fairly short story and we've already established that Herbert isn't like a great guy. We already know he's not like super wholesome and oh my gosh, what a surprise, he's actually racist. We don't need further confirmation that he sucks. We've already established that. But the author chose to make that character Black seemingly as a justification to bring up the fact that these other two characters are racist. Because these other characters being racist is not relevant to the story in any way, it just kind of comes across like it was thrown in there as an excuse so that the author could say the N-word and use other racist rhetoric. I'm not saying that that is the case. Again, I do not know this author and I do not want to make accusations based off of one story. I'm saying that is how it comes across when you read it. It seems so out of place and it does not come across as a genuine attempt to flesh out a character. It seems completely like pigeonholed in there and it's very strange to me. And so I was disappointed by that because at best, it's a distraction from what is otherwise a very entertaining, funny story. And at worst, it actually is everything that I just said it comes across to be. It could just be an attempt to flesh out a character that was, in my opinion, poorly executed. So that was really too bad because I really thought that the rest of the story was really entertaining and I otherwise enjoyed this story. I really wasn't sure how to feel by the time I was done with the book, unfortunately. Next up, I figured to pair with a demonic penis, we need to have a haunted vagina. So, next up, we have The Haunted Vagina by Carlton Mellick III. So, if you don't know, Carlton Mellick III is the Bizarro guy. Bizarro. Surreal, weird shit. This is about a lady named Stacy who has a haunted vagina. Stacy is dating a man named Steve. He did not notice the haunting cries coming from her coochie at first, but later on he does start to hear eerie sounds coming from down nether. And at that point, it does kind of create a bit of an issue in their relationship because he just feels kind of weird having good old-fashioned spicy time with her vajayjay, with her in her coochie, it does start to negatively impact their relationship, right? But here's the thing. Is that Stacy, she's kind of frustrated because she feels like Steve is so lacking in curiosity. And so she's really prodding him to check it out. She's like, hey man, get in there. And then something comes out. And after that thing comes out, She's like, I wonder if anything else is in there. You should go investigate. And so she sends him in, and he quite literally crawls into her vagina and like completely. It's some sort of Honey, Did I Shrink the Kids sort of situation where once he's in there, he shrinks down to size. So we have a bit of a spelunking situation, and he gets in there to investigate. It is simultaneously her physical womb, but also kind of like another dimension, sort of. Like it's a whole world. He crawls in, and it's like he's in the woods, and there's like a log cabin, and there's people freaking hanging out, like weird little critter things. And so then the question kind of becomes, how motivated is he to return to the regular world versus just sort of chilling and hanging out once again. Now, even more so this time, because this is Carlton Mellick, this is Bizarro. It's not as like teehee silly as I was expecting, you know? It's weird and peculiar. There are moments of humor in it for sure. But overall, it had a less silly tone to it than I was expecting. There is a quote in here that's genuinely really funny. So I'll put up on the screen the one of the parts that I thought was really funny and made me laugh. So it is a very surreal kind of world all up in there. Overall, if I'm being honest, I liked the story, but I did not like it nearly as much as I liked the other story that I read from him. I don't recall what it was called, but it had a man with a lollipop head. It's always fun to read Bizarro, though, so I did enjoy it. And last up, we have Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix, and I listened to the audio version of this. It's narrated by Ty Salmons and Bronson. Well, it's spelled Pinchot, but I'm willing to bet it's not pronounced Pinchot. Maybe it is. I don't know. Pinchot? Bronson Pinchot? I'm sorry. I'm not very good at things. It takes place in a furniture store called Orsk, which is kind of an IKEA wannabe. So you have this store that is American, but it has all these very frou-frou European sounding names. It's trying very hard to be pretentious. Our main character is a lady named Amy, and she is just an employee who would probably be considered a pretty standard retail employee, where she doesn't love her job. She's just kind of going through the motions. She does attempt to move up in the company and fails to do so, but it's not because she wants to do that. It's just a matter of she works here, and that just sort of seems like the next thing to do. There's a lot of commentary in this story, aside from the horror and the comedy and all the other stuff. There's a lot of commentary in this story about all of that sort of things. Working in retail, feeling like you're stuck on the hamster wheel, can't ever get ahead, commentary on capitalism, and about the sorts of employers who try to ingratiate themselves to you by pretending that they view you as family when they do not. They would never treat family this way. Which, most people who have worked retail for any length of time have experienced. But yeah, there's all sorts of commentary on that sort of stuff. But our main plot is that somebody appears to be breaking into the store at night and vandalizing it, leaving all sorts of messes behind for employees to find when they come in the morning. So here comes her boss, Basil, who he's the sort of guy who kind of acts like he really believes all that sort of employer bullshit that they spout all the time. Like, here at Orsk, we really care about our employees, and the Orsk way of thinking is blah, 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 blah. One of those people who are very by the book and take their job very seriously and all of that. She doesn't particularly like Basil, but Basil. I listened to the audio version and I can't remember how they said it. Whatever. She's not really enough of a hard worker. Like she shows up for work and she does the bare minimum to get by, but she doesn't really have the attitude that keeps her in his good graces. And so she's really planning on trying to transfer to a different store with all of this vandalism happening. And Basil wants to get in the good graces of his higher ups. They don't want to draw public attention to what's going on. So what he wants to do is he wants some of the employees to stay in the store overnight to see if they can catch who's breaking into the store at night. Why would he ask Amy? Well, apparently he tried to ask more sensible people and none of them were available. So he's like, Amy, if you do this with me, then I will approve of your transfer. And you won't have issues or whatever. Amy and this other cashier lady, Ruth Ann, kind of a way of like softening things up a bit. Ruth Ann has the energy of somebody who isn't a kiss ass per se, but she does genuinely have a very kind of likable, upbeat energy to her. She's optimistic enough that Basil likes her attitude, but she's not a bootlicker or a suck up or disingenuous, so Amy also likes her. So she kind of is a good balance that she kind of fits in with this little group. They all end up spending the night in the store trying to catch the vandal. And during this night, things escalate. Not only do they run into some other employees who are doing their own investigation, believing that there's supernatural forces at play for the weird things happening in the store. But they also find some answers to the questions that they've had. I just thought it was really funny. I'm obsessed with how Basil is trying so hard to do what he thinks his bosses would want him to do and take care of things and keep it under wraps, don't let the public know, blah, blah, blah. And in the meanwhile, Amy just like sees these other two employees who are like, we're looking in to see if there's ghosts here or whatever. And she's like, we should do a seance. Like she just completely jumps ship from like investigating with Basil at the first given opportunity. And it's not because she believes in it. She just is like, she just doesn't give a shit, I won't get too much more into it, but surprisingly, I actually thought out of all the stories that I read that this one was the funniest, which surprised me. I've never read Grady Hendrix before. I feel like that's a somewhat popular author. I just haven't read them before. But yeah, I guess just based off of the titles and everything, this was the one that I thought might have the least amount of humor in it. But I actually thought this one was the funniest. The two narrators, Ty Salmons was the voice of Amy, throughout most of the story. But then at the beginning of the chapters, they have the Bronson Pinchot coming in doing the Orsk voice, and it's different advertisements. I thought that was such a nice touch to the story, but also just the narration. It's the tone of it. He performs really well. And it kind of starts off at the beginning of the story where, chapter 1, I think it was a bruca, which is like a sofa. And so the advertisement is very normal. It's like, when you come to Orsk, you will unveil our bruca, a sofa with tall backs and soft cushions to rest and rejuvenate yourself. Come to Orsk to check it out today. And then by the end of the book, like the tone of the advertisements gets darker and more chaotic throughout the story. And so then like towards the end, it's like the word gurney, but they had like a European spelling for it. And they're like, come to Orsk, look into our gurney, a stretcher that can take you from location to location, such as to the hospital or to your final resting place. Like, it's like this descent from normal advertisements you'd see at a store to shit like that. Like, it gets darker and darker throughout the story, which was just such a nice touch because it's coinciding with the chaotic nature of the story and how things start off so normal, and then at the end they are anything but. This story gets wild, and I really enjoyed it. The way that the horror elements were handled, how realistic everything starts off, and then the reality just kind of becomes distorted throughout the whole book, and it gets kind of foggy and confusing. This one, out of the group, surprisingly, this one was my favorite. I really enjoyed it. Needless to say, I had a lot of fun reading these. They do all have humor in them, and they were all a wide variety of different types of hauntings in different locations. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye! Instead of, like, drinking from the straw, they should have, like, blown... I'm not gonna do that. You know, he did throw it back to the Necronomicon from H.P. Lovecraft. Maybe the racism was also an homage to H.P. Lovecraft.